The ancient Velthari warrior Thexmor stood before the assembled officers of the Galactic War Academy. His forearms trembled slightly as he began his account of the human wars. Conflicts that had ended 50 cycles ago but still haunted his dreams. "You younglings think you know warfare," Thexmor rasped, his compound eyes reflecting the horror of memory. "But you have never faced the humans." The massive lecture hall fell silent. Officers from 12 different species shifted uncomfortably. In their seats, some were fresh graduates who had only heard whispered stories about the legendary human wars. Others were seasoned veterans who remembered the fear that once gripped the galaxy. When humanity first emerged from their small blue world, Thexmor's scarred carapace bore witness to countless battles. Deep plasma burns ran across his chest plates. His left arm had been replaced with a mechanical prosthetic after a human explosive device had torn it away during the siege of Proxima. But it was his eyes that told the real story, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen horrors beyond imagination. 50 cycles ago, the Galactic Coalition ruled over 400 star systems. He began, his voice carrying the weight of bitter experience. We had conquered species that could manipulate gravity with their minds. We had enslaved creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space. We thought we were the apex of galactic civilization. A young Zephyrian officer raised her crystalline hand. "Commander Vexmore, our historical records show that humans were barely a Type 1 civilization when first contact occurred. How could such a primitive species pose any real threat?" Vexmore's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter, but held no humor. "That question, young one, is exactly what doomed us all." He activated the holographic display at the center of the lecture hall. The image showed a small blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star, Terra, as the humans called it, or Earth in their dominant language. "When our scout ships first detected radio signals from the Sol system, we dispatched the exploration vessel Cosmic Dawn to investigate. Captain Velthok reported back that the planet harbored a bipedal species that had just achieved basic spaceflight. Their technology was crude, chemical rockets, primitive computers, weapons that still used explosive projectiles." The hologram shifted to show images of early human spacecraft, bulky, inefficient machines that barely qualified as interstellar vessels. The alien officers chuckled at the primitive designs. "We made our first mistake right there," Thexmor continued, his voice growing darker. "We judged them by their technology, not by their nature. The Coalition High Command decided that humanity would make excellent slaves. Their physical strength was impressive, their intelligence adequate, and their rapid breeding cycle would provide a steady workforce for our mining operations." He clicked his mandibles nervously. "When we first encountered their world directly, our scouts reported a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. Their leader at first contact was a female named Hai-Jin, commanding their orbital defense station. She was young by human standards, perhaps 30 of their years, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire." The hologram now showed the human space station, spinning wheel of metal and composite materials that looked almost laughably fragile compared to Coalition warships. But Thexmor's expression grew grave as he continued. "Our diplomatic vessel, the Asterisk Stars, Pride Asterisk, approached under full battle honors. We expected the humans to be awed by our technological superiority. The Star's Pride was a kilometer long, armed with plasma cannons that could crack a moon in half. Our crew of 300 represented the finest warriors from 6 different Coalition worlds." Thexmor paused, his forearms gesturing expressively. Ambassador Kreltek, may his memory be honored, opened communications with the human station. He was magnificent in his ceremonial armor, speaking with the authority of 400 conquered worlds behind him. The translation systems converted his words perfectly as he delivered. "Coalition Protocol 7, immediate surrender and submission to galactic authority." The Academy audience leaned forward, sensing the critical moment approaching. "Commander." Hai-Jin appeared on our main viewer. Thexmor continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She wore a simple blue uniform with strange markings on her shoulders. No ceremonial armor, no displays of wealth or power. She looked directly at Ambassador Kreltok, with those burning human eyes, and listen to our demands in complete silence. Moore's voice dropped to a whisper. Hajin's response was 3 words that would doom our empire. Come and take it. The ancient warrior's compound eyes swept across the assembled officers. You must understand, in 10,000 cycles of galactic expansion, no species had ever refused Coalition Protocol 7. Not once. Even the mighty Thrakar, who could breathe fire and stood 3 meters tall, had eventually submitted when faced with our overwhelming force. But this small, human female, standing on her primitive station, with weapons that couldn't even penetrate our shields, looked at the combined might of the Galactic Coalition and said no. The Academy fell silent as Dexmore described how humanity's refusal to submit triggered the largest military mobilization in galactic history. The Coalition assembled fleets from 17 different worlds, confident that this backwater species would crumble within days. High Command was furious. Dexmore explained, how dare these primitives defy the natural order. Fleet Admiral Zekrith assembled the 3rd Battle Fleet, 50 dreadnoughts, 200 cruisers, and over 1,000 support vessels. It was enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed the massive Coalition fleet approaching the Sol system like a dark cloud of death. We had no idea, Dexmore continued, that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of killing each other. War wasn't just something they did, it was what they were born for. The veteran's voice grew haunted. We were mobilizing our fleets. Human intelligence networks had already analyzed our technology, reversed engineered our communication protocols, and begun preparing for what they knew would be a fight for their very survival. They didn't see our superior numbers as overwhelming force. They saw them as targets. The Battle of Luna Station changed everything. Dexmore began the 2nd session, his scarred carapace gleaming under the Academy lights. I was wing commander aboard the Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, part of a fleet of 300 vessels sent to crush humanity's outer defenses. The ancient warrior's mechanical arm whirred softly as he gestured toward the holographic display. Luna Station materialized in the center of the lecture hall, a sprawling network of interconnected modules and docking bays, orbiting Earth's moon. To the alien officers, it looked like a child's toy compared to the massive Coalition warships surrounding it. Fleet Admiral Zekreth was confident this would be over quickly. Exmore continued, his compound eyes reflecting the phantom glow of distant explosions. Luna Station was humanity's primary defense outpost, but our intelligence indicated it housed only a skeleton crew. We expected them to surrender the moment they saw our fleet. He paused, mandibles clicking in distress. Luna Station was defended by exactly 47 humans. 47 against 300 ships? A Christian cadet raised her translucent hand. Commander, how could such a small force even begin to engage a fleet that size? Their weapons couldn't possibly have the range or power to threaten Coalition vessels. Dexmore's laugh was bitter. That's exactly what we thought, young one. We learned too late that humans don't fight the way we do. They don't calculate odds or weigh tactical advantages. They just fight. The holographic display shifted to show the interior of Luna Station's command center. The alien cadets leaned forward as Dexmore described the human commander, Du Yen, who coordinated the defense from the station's nerve center. He was a compact man with graying hair and steady hands, wearing a simple uniform marked with strange human symbols. Commander Du Yan had been a soldier for most of his adult life, Dexmore explained. He'd fought in human conflicts on their homeworld, survived battles that would have broken most species. But nothing in his experience prepared him for what was coming. The display showed the Coalition fleet taking position around Luna Station like predators circling wounded prey. Massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of reducing the station to scrap metal with a single plasma volley, moved into firing formation. Admiral. Zekrith opened communications one final time. Dexmore continued. He offered the humans a chance to surrender with honor. Their families would be relocated to comfortable colonies. Their warriors would serve in our auxiliary forces. It was more generous than any species had ever been offered. Dexmore's voice grew quiet. Doyun's response was simple. We didn't ask you to come here. Leave, or we'll send you home in pieces. The Academy fell silent. Even the youngest cadets understood the implications. 47 beings challenging 300 warships was beyond courage. It was madness. The bombardment began at 0800 hours. Station time, Vexmore said, his mechanical fingers tapping nervously on the podium. I watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion as our plasma cannons lit up Luna Station's shields. We expected them to collapse within minutes. The holographic display erupted in brilliant flashes of energy as Coalition weapons struck the station's defensive. But instead of collapsing, the shields held, flickering and sparking, but somehow maintaining integrity. That's when we got our first taste of human engineering genius, Dexmore explained. They had modified their shield generators in ways our scientists said were impossible. Instead of trying to absorb our plasma bursts, they were redirecting the energy back into their own power grid. Our weapons were actually making their defenses stronger. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the Academy audience. Several officers checked their data pads, running calculations that confirmed the theoretical impossibility of what Dixmore described. But shields couldn't protect them forever, the veteran continued. Our heavy cruisers began targeting the station's structural weak points. When the first hull breach opened in Section 7, we thought victory was assured. When the Coalition fleet opened fire, they expected quick surrender. Instead, they witnessed something that defied all military logic. Now, the human named Byung-ho was in charge of engineering Section 7. Dexmore continued, his voice taking on an almost reverential tone. He was young, maybe 25 human years, with quick hands and eyes that missed nothing. When the plasma blast tore through his section's hull, explosive decompression killed half his engineering crew instantly. The holographic display showed the devastating breach atmosphere rushing out into space, debris spinning away into the void, and the twisted wreckage of what had been a functioning engineering compartment. Any rational being would have evacuated, Dexmore said. The section was lost, the crew was dead or dying, and staying meant certain death. But Byung-ho wasn't rational. He was human. Dexmore's voice cracked. He sealed himself into the reactor compartment with emergency welding equipment and began manually overriding every safety protocol the humans had installed. Our sensors detected massive energy spikes from that section, but we assumed it was just system failures from battle damage. The display zoomed in on the engineering compartment, showing a lone human figure working frantically at glowing control panels while the station shook around him. Sparks flew from damaged systems, and warning lights bathed everything in hellish red. Gah! Byung-ho knew he was going to die, Vexmore whispered, but he was determined to take as many of us with him as possible. He rerouted the station's entire power grid through Section 7's reactor core, creating an overload that would have impressed our own demolition experts. The ancient warrior paused, his forearms trembling slightly. The explosion vaporized Section 7 and everything within a kilometer radius. 6 of our destroyers were caught in the blast. The Thunder's Edge, the Void Hunter, the Starpiercer. Ships that had conquered a dozen worlds reduced to glowing debris in seconds. Gasps echoed through the Academy as officers realized the implications. A single human, armed with nothing but desperate courage and technical knowledge, had eliminated 6 Coalition warships. Another human, Jiwoo, continued fighting even after losing both legs to a plasma blast. Dexmore continued, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and admiration. She was a maintenance specialist, barely out of her teens, responsible for the station's internal defense systems. The display showed a young woman dragging herself through narrow maintenance tunnels. Her uniform torn and bloody, her face set in grim determination despite her horrific injuries. She crawled through the station's ventilation system, leaving a trail of blood behind her, and began manually detonating demolition charges that had been placed as a last resort. Each explosion sent chunks of Luna Station spinning into our formation. But Jiwoo had calculated the trajectories perfectly. Dexmore's mandibles clicked rapidly as he relived the memory. 12 more ships were crippled by debris strikes. The Cosmic Fury lost its main engines when a piece of station hull punched through its reactor shielding. The Galactic Pride went into uncontrolled spin when debris severed its navigation array. The Academy audience sat in stunned silence as Dexmore described how Commander Duyan, with the station falling apart around him, transmitted a message to the Coalition fleet. By this time, Luna Station was a wreck, the veteran continued. Half the modules were gone. Atmosphere was venting from dozens of breaches, and the remaining humans were cut off from each other. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered. The holographic display showed Daeyun in the command center, surrounded by sparking consoles and emergency lighting. His uniform was torn, blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes still burned with defiant fire. He looked directly into our communication array and said, "You want this station? Come down here and take it from my corpse. We lost 43. Vessels taking that station," Dexmore whispered. 43 ships and over 15,000 Coalition warriors, all to capture a single human outpost defended by 47 beings. His voice grew haunted. And when we finally boarded it, when our assault troops fought their way through the twisted wreckage and reached the command center, we found Doyan still alive, still fighting, with his command console sparking around him. He had a broken arm, internal injuries that should have killed him hours earlier, and he was still trying to activate the station's self-destruct sequence. Morse compound eyes swept across the assembled officers. It took 4 of our best warriors to subdue him. 4 trained killers in powered armor to bring down 1 injured human who refused to quit. That was when we realized we weren't fighting a normal species. We were fighting something that simply refused to die. Dexmore's third session began with him displaying a holographic image of the Sol system. The entire Academy Hall dimmed as planets, asteroids, and orbital installations materialized in brilliant detail above the assembled officers. After Luna Station, the Coalition High Command was furious. Dexmore began, his mechanical arm worry as he manipulated the display controls. 43 ships lost to a single human outpost. Fleet Admiral Zekroth was stripped of command and executed for incompetence. The new Supreme Commander Velkroth, the destroyer, had personally overseen the conquest of 18 star systems. The hologram showed massive fleet formations converging from across Coalition space. Sleek Zephyrian destroyers, massive Thrakari battle cruisers, and the dreaded Velthari dreadnoughts that had broken the will of countless species. The Coalition committed everything. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon of mass destruction. We would end this human threat once and for all. A young Christian officer raised her translucent hand.
"Ow."
Commander Dexmore, our records indicate the Coalition assembled over 2,000 vessels for the Sol assault. Surely no single system could withstand such overwhelming force. Compound. Eyes glittered with dark memory. That's what we believed, Cadet. We had learned to respect human stubbornness, but even we couldn't imagine what they had prepared for us. The veterans for arms gestured to the display, which now showed Earth's solar system in stunning detail. The human admiral in charge of Sol's defense was a female named Subin. Intelligence suggested she was barely 30 years old by their reckoning. When Supreme Commander Velkroth reviewed her file, he actually laughed. The holographic display focused on a human female with short black hair and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. She wore a simple blue uniform with strange markings that human military forces use to denote rank. We laughed at the idea of such a young creature commanding their final stand. Dexmore continued, but his laughter now held no humor. Supreme Commander Velkreth had been conquering worlds since before this human was born. He had personally killed enemy commanders with over a century of experience. What could one young female possibly do against the combined might of the Coalition? The display shifted to show intelligence reports and surveillance footage collected over the previous 2 years. What the alien officers saw made several of them gasp in disbelief. Admiral Suben had spent 2 years turning their entire star system into a weapon, Smore explained, his voice filled with grudging admiration. The asteroid belt between their 4th and 5th planets had been converted into a massive kinetic bombardment system. Millions of space rocks, each one fitted with simple guidance systems and chemical propulsion units. The hologram showed the transformed asteroid belt what had once been random debris. Orbiting the sun was now a coordinated network of potential. Projectiles all aimed outward, toward the system's edge where any invading fleet would have to approach. Their outer planets housed defense platforms operated by children, Dexmore continued, his voice growing haunted. Human youngsters, some barely into their teens, manning weapon systems that could crack battleship armor. They had trained an entire generation for war. A Thackeray officer, his scaled hide rippling with agitation, stood up. Commander, children operating military hardware. It violates every civilized convention of warfare. Dexmore's mandibles clicked grimly. Humans don't follow our conventions, warrior. They fight with everything they have, using everyone who can hold a weapon. Those children had grown up knowing that aliens wanted to enslave their species. Volunteered for those positions. The display showed the Coalition's grand fleet, over 2,000 vessels strong, entering the Sol system like a dark tide of destruction. Massive dreadnoughts led the formation, their hulls bristling with plasma, cannons, and missile batteries. Behind them came wave after wave of cruisers, destroyers, and assault ships carrying invasion forces. Dexmore described the confidence, the certainty of victory, the expectation of humanity's surrender when faced with such overwhelming force. Supreme Commander Velkrath ordered all communication channels opened, intended to broadcast humanity's surrender across the galaxy as a warning to other species who might consider resistance. Instead, we received a transmission from Subin herself, Dexmore continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She appeared on our screens, this young human female, standing on the bridge of their flagship with explosions already lighting up the space around her ship. The holographic display showed Admiral Subin as she appeared to the Coalition fleet. Calm, determined, with the fires of battle already reflecting in her dark eyes. Behind her, human officers worked frantically at their stations, while the first long-range shots from Coalition ships began impacting their outer defenses. She looked directly at Supreme Commander Velkrath and spoke with the voice of someone who had already accepted death, Dexmore said. Her words were simple, but they chilled every warrior in our fleet. You came to our home. You threatened our children. Now you die here. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The veteran's voice rose as he described the chaos that erupted across the Sol system. The human engineer Taman had rigged their moon as a massive kinetic projectile, Dexmore explained, his forearms gesturing wildly. Not the small rocks from their asteroid belt, but their actual moon, a celestial body with enough mass to shatter continents. They had built hidden engines on its dark side and waited 2 years for the perfect moment. The holographic display showed Earth's moon suddenly changing course, its gentle orbit becoming a collision trajectory aimed directly at the center of the Coalition formation. Gravitational sensors screamed warnings as the massive object accelerated beyond what should have been possible. 37 of our heaviest ships were crushed when the moon fragment impacted our center formation. Dexmore continued, but that was just the beginning. While we were trying to avoid the lunar debris, their real attack began. The display erupted in brilliant flashes as human fighters emerged from hidden bases throughout the system. Pilot So-Young led the first wave, Dexmore said, his voice filled with horrified respect. She commanded a squadron of modified fighters, each one loaded with every explosive they could carry. What made the attack so devastating wasn't the fighters' weapons, but their tactics. So-Young didn't try to dogfight our interceptors, Dexmore explained. She led suicide runs against Coalition dreadnoughts, ramming her fighter directly into critical systems. Her wingmates followed her example, turning their own ships into guided missiles. The Academy audience watched in stunned silence as the holographic display showed human fighters deliberately crashing into Coalition vessels, each impact causing secondary explosions that rippled through enemy formations. But the most devastating attack came from their scientist Wujin, Dexmore continued, his compound eyes reflecting remembered terror. While we were focused on their kinetic weapons and suicide attacks, she had been working on something far more dangerous, a computer virus designed specifically for Coalition systems. The display showed Coalition ships suddenly turning their weapons on each other, their navigation systems failing, their communication networks broadcasting human propaganda instead of tactical data. Wujin had spent months studying captured Coalition technology from Luna Station, Dexmore explained. She created a virus that didn't just disrupt our systems, it turned them against us. Our own ships became weapons pointed at their allies. The veteran's voice cracked with emotion as he described the final moments of the battle. Supreme Commander Velkrath tried to order a retreat, but half his fleet was no longer under his control. The other half was being systematically destroyed by human forces that seemed to be everywhere at once. We lost 60% of our fleet in 6 hours, Dexmore concluded, his voice barely above a whisper. Over 1,200 ships, destroyed not by superior technology or numbers, but by humans who fought like the universe itself depended on their victory. The holographic display faded, leaving the Academy in darkness, except for the emergency lighting. In that darkness, this Moore's final words echoed with terrible finality. That was the day the Coalition learned that some species cannot be conquered. They can only be destroyed, and humans had proven they would rather die free than live as slaves. After Sol, everything changed. Vexmore began his 4th session, his voice barely above a whisper. The Academy lights dimmed automatically as he activated the holographic display, showing the scattered remnants of Coalition fleets fleeing through deep space. We were no longer the hunters, he continued, his mechanical arm trembling as he gestured. To the display, one devastating battle. Humanity had shattered our illusion of invincibility. But what happened next was far worse than military defeat. The humans had tasted our blood, and they wanted more. The hologram showed Coalition survivors limping away from the Sol system, their once mighty fleets reduced to scattered groups of damaged vessels. Ships that had terrorized entire sectors now ran with their shields down and weapons powered off, hoping to avoid detection. Supreme Commander Velkrath was dead, vaporized when the human moon fragment crushed his flagship, Dexmore explained. The Coalition High Command was in chaos. Some wanted to negotiate peace. Others demanded we glass every human world from orbit. But it didn't matter what we wanted anymore. A young Zephyrian officer raised her crystalline hand. Commander, why? Didn't the Coalition simply withdraw beyond human reach? Your fleets could have regrouped in distant sectors and planned a new strategy? Dexmore's compound eyes fixed on her with something approaching pity. 'Cause, young one, we didn't understand what we were dealing with. We thought humans were defenders, content to protect their territory. We learned too late that they were predators, and we had just taught them how to hunt. The display shifted to show technical schematics that made several officers gasp in disbelief. Sleek vessels appeared in the hologram, their designs somehow both familiar and utterly alien to Coalition eyes. The humans had reverse-engineered our technology and improved it in ways our scientists said were impossible. Dexmore continued, his voice filled with grudging admiration and lingering terror. They didn't just copy our ships, they perfected them. Our plasma drives became more efficient in their hands. Our shield generators became lighter and stronger. Our weapons became deadlier. The hologram focused on one particular vessel, long, predatory, with angular lines that seemed to cut through space itself. Unlike Coalition ships with their ornate decorations and ceremonial elements, this craft was pure function, built for one purpose, killing. But the most terrifying innovation was their ghost ships, Dexmore said, his mandibles clicking nervously. These were vessels that could travel through deep space for years without resupply, crewed by humans who had undergone biological modifications to survive in the void. The display showed the interior of a ghost ship and several alien officers recoiled in horror. The human crew moved through corridors filled with a strange mist, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Tubes and cables connected directly to their bodies, feeding them nutrients and recycling their waste. They had turned themselves into living machines, Dexmore whispered. Hearts that beat once per minute to conserve energy, lungs that could process almost pure carbon dioxide. Minds that could enter hibernation for months, while their bodies remained alert for danger. A Thorokari warrior stood up abruptly, his scaled hide rippling with disgust. This is abomination. No civilized species would mutilate themselves so grotesquely. That's what we thought, Dexmore replied grimly. But humans don't care about civilized behavior when their survival is at stake. They care about winning, and these modifications made them the perfect deep space hunters. The Coalition scattered Fleets found themselves hunted across the galaxy by relentless human pursuit ships. The hologram showed pursuit patterns, not random attacks, but carefully planned campaigns that herded coalition forces into predetermined kill zones. The ghost ships would track us for weeks, staying just beyond sensor range, Thexmore explained. They studied our patrol routes, our communication schedules, our supply needs. When they finally struck, it was always at our weakest moment. Veteran's voice grew haunted as he continued. I commanded the heavy cruiser Void's Edge when the human ship Iron Wolf began hunting us. My vessel was part of the 7th Reconnaissance Fleet, 12 ships tasked with finding safe passage back to Coalition space. The holographic display showed a detailed schematic of the Void's Edge, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and armor designed to survive anything the galaxy could throw at it. Next to it appeared the much smaller human ghost ship, looking like a predatory fish beside a wounded whale. For 7 months across 4 star systems, that single human vessel stalked us, Thexmore continued, his forearms gesturing helplessly. Their captain, a warrior named Geneseo, would appear in our sensor range just long enough to destroy a single ship, then vanish again like smoke in vacuum. The display showed the systematic destruction of the Coalition fleet. First, the supply. Ship Eternal Provision, caught while refueling near a gas giant. Then the escort destroyer Star's Wrath, ambushed while investigating an asteroid field. Each attack was precisely calculated to cause maximum psychological damage. Geneseo didn't just kill our ships, Dexmore explained, his voice cracking. With remembered terror, he turned it into theater. Before each attack, he would broadcast on all frequencies, naming the ship he was about to destroy and the officers who would die. The veteran described Captain Geneseo's psychological warfare in detail. How he would transmit personal messages to Coalition crew members, mentioning their families by name. How he seemed to know their tactical preferences, their personal fears, their secret weaknesses. The captain of the Thunder's Honor was named Krelvac, Dexmore said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. He had 3 younglings back on his homeworld. Geneseo knew their names, their ages, their favorite games. Before he destroyed the Thunder's Honor, he transmitted recordings of those younglings playing, then calmly announced that Krelvac would never see them again. Several officers in the Academy audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just warfare, it was systematic torment. Geneseo seemed to anticipate every tactical move we made, Thixmore continued. When we tried to ambush him near a nebula, he was waiting with long-range missiles. When we attempted to lose him in a crowded system, he used the civilian traffic as cover for his approach. The human had turned hunting into an art form. The hologram showed the final confrontation, the Void's Edge, alone in deep space. Its escort ships destroyed one by one over 7 months of relentless pursuit. The massive Coalition cruiser looked pitiful in its isolation, running with minimal power to avoid detection. By the end, my crew was dying of fear, Dexmore admitted, his voice barely audible. Not from battle damage or equipment failure, but from the constant knowledge that death was stalking us. Warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns were reduced to trembling wrecks, jumping at every sensor ghost. The veterans' compound eyes swept across the Academy audience. Some of my officers began requesting permission to take their own lives rather than face Geneseo's inevitable attack. The ship's doctor reported that half the crew was showing symptoms of severe psychological trauma. That's when Geneseo finally contacted me directly, Vexmore continued, his voice growing steady as he relived the memory. He appeared on my command screen not through our communication system, but somehow hijacking our internal monitors. Security said it was impossible, but there he was. The holographic display showed the human captain as he appeared to the Coalition crew. Geneseo was younger than expected, perhaps 40 by human reckoning, with graying hair and eyes that held no mercy. His uniform was simple, practical, bearing none of the decorative elements that Coalition officers prized. He looked at me with those cold human eyes and spoke with the voice of someone who had already won, Thexmore said. His words were simple and direct. Surrender your ship and I'll let your crew live. Refuse, and I'll kill them one by one until you're alone in the dark. Dexmore's mandibles clicked rapidly as he remembered his response. I tried to negotiate, to appeal to whatever honor this human might possess. I offered him tribute, valuable intelligence, even my own life in exchange. For my crew's safety, Genesio listened patiently, then smiled, and that smile was more terrifying than any weapon, he said. Commander, you have 10 minutes to decide. Choose quickly, because I've already locked targeting solutions on your engine room, your bridge, and your life support systems. Your crew dies in the order I choose unless you surrender completely. The Academy fell silent as Thexmore described his impossible choice. Surrender meant disgrace and probable execution by Coalition High Command. Fighting meant watching his crew die one by one at the hands of an enemy who had already proven his superiority. I had no choice, Thexmore whispered, his mechanical arm clenching into a fist. I ordered all weapons powered down and transmitted our unconditional surrender. Genesio kept his word exactly as promised. But he took our weapons, disabled our engines, and left us alive. But before he departed, he transmitted one final message to my crew. He told them that mercy was a choice humans made, not a weakness enemies could exploit. He said that other coalition commanders might not be so fortunate. That mercy was more terrifying than any threat, Thexmore concluded, his forearms trembling, because it proved that humans didn't kill out of hatred or fear. They killed because they chose to, and they spared lives because they chose to. We were no longer fighting an enemy. We were being judged by our conquerors. The war ended not with our defeat, but with our understanding. Thexmore began his final session, his voice carrying the weight of 50 cycles worth of reflection.
The Academy Hall was packed beyond capacity.
Word had spread throughout the dot station about the legendary veteran's testimony. Officers from every coalition species had come to hear the conclusion of his tale. After 18 months of systematic hunting, the Coalition High Command faced a choice no galactic power had ever confronted. Thexmore continued, his mechanical arm adjusting the holographic display. We could continue fighting a war we couldn't win. Or we could attempt something that had never been tried in 10,000 cycles of galactic history, negotiating with a species from a position of complete weakness. The display showed the shattered remnants of what had once been the mightiest military force in the galaxy. Fewer than 200 coalition vessels remained operational, scattered across dozens of star systems, constantly hunted by human ghosts. Ships that appeared without warning and vanished like nightmares. High Admiral Zethkar, the last surviving member of the Supreme Command Council, made the decision that saved our species from extinction, Thexmore explained. He transmitted a message on all human frequencies, requesting terms for unconditional surrender. The holographic display shifted to show the human response, not the expected demands for submission, but a simple invitation to meet aboard a human vessel at neutral coordinates. Several alien officers in the audience exchanged glances of disbelief. The Coalition High Command finally sued for peace. We expected the humans to demand our complete destruction, Thexmore continued, his compound eyes reflecting the phantom glow of remembered starlight. We had seen their capacity for violence, their refusal to yield, their ability to turn anything into a weapon. Every precedent in galactic history suggested they would demand the total dismantling of coalition civilization. A young Christian officer raised her translucent hand. Commander, surely the humans realized that showing mercy to a defeated enemy was a sign of weakness? Every military academy in the galaxy teaches that defeated foes must be thoroughly crushed to prevent future rebellion. Thexmore's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. That question, Cadet, reveals exactly why the Coalition lost. The war, we thought we understood warfare, but humans taught us that victory and conquest are not the same thing. He paused, his forearms spread wide. Instead of dictating terms from fortified positions or broadcasting ultimatums across the galaxy, we met with Admiral Subin and General Hyanwu aboard the human vessel Harmony. The holographic display materialized the human ship in stunning detail. Unlike the predatory ghost ships that had terrorized coalition forces, the Harmony was clearly designed for diplomatic purposes. Its hull bore no visible weapons. Its docking bays were oversized to accommodate vessels from different species. and its communication arrays were powerful enough to broadcast across multiple star systems simultaneously. The name itself should have warned us, Dexmore said softly. Humans had built a ship specifically for making peace, not waging war. But we were so focused on their military capabilities that we missed the significance of that choice. The veteran described the approach to the Harmony in vivid detail. Coalition representatives traveled in the last functional diplomatic vessel, escorted by human fighters that could have destroyed them at any moment, but instead provided safe passage through what had once been Coalition space. Admiral Subin met us at the airlock personally, Dexmore continued, his voice filled with wonder even after 50 cycles. She could have dictated terms from a position of absolute strength. Our fleets controlled Coalition space. Their technology had surpassed ours, and their warriors had proven superior to anything we could field. The hologram showed the human admiral as she appeared to the Coalition delegation, still young by galactic standards, wearing a simple dress uniform rather than the ornate ceremonial armor that Coalition leaders preferred. Behind her stood General Hyanwu, a compact man with graying hair and eyes that held both strength and compassion. They greeted us not as conquerors meeting defeated enemies, but as equals seeking common ground, Dexmore explained. Admiral Subin spoke our language fluently. She had learned it during the war. It's not to interrogate prisoners, but to understand our culture and motivations. Dexmore's voice grew wonder-filled as he described what followed. But they didn't demand tribute or territory or unconditional servitude. Admiral Subin presented a treaty that established mutual borders, trade agreements, and cultural exchange programs. General Hyanwu spoke of shared scientific research and joint exploration missions. They offered partnership where they could have demanded subjugation. The holographic display showed the proposed treaty terms, and gasps echoed through the academy. As officers read the details, instead of the harsh demands expected from victorious conquerors, the document outlined cooperative ventures that would benefit both species. They wanted to share their medical advances with our colony's suffering. From plague outbreaks, Dexmore continued, they offered to help rebuild worlds damaged during the war. They proposed joint military patrols to protect trade routes from pirates and raiders. A Thrakari warrior stood up abruptly, his scaled hide flushed with confusion. Commander, this makes no strategic sense. Why would humans strengthen potential enemies instead of eliminating threats to their dominance? That question kept me awake for cycles after the treaty signing, Dexmore replied. I couldn't understand why they would choose cooperation over conquest. Then I realized I was still thinking like a coalition officer, not like a human. Veteran looked across the academy audience, his mechanical fingers tapping against the podium. Humans don't think in terms of dominance and submission. They think in terms of problems and solutions. The war had been a problem. We had threatened their families and their freedom. But once that problem was solved, they were ready to work on new challenges together. General Hyanwu explained it to me personally during a private meeting, Dexmore continued. He said that humans had learned from their own history that defeated enemies who were treated with respect become powerful allies, while conquered peoples who are oppressed eventually become dangerous rebels. The holographic display shifted too. Show the signing ceremony representatives from dozens of coalition species standing alongside human diplomats as the peace accords were formally approved. What struck many observers was the genuine warmth between former enemies who had been trying to kill each other just months earlier. That was when I truly understood the most terrifying thing about humans, Dexmore said, his compound eyes fixing on each young officer in turn. It wasn't their capacity for violence, though that was beyond anything we had imagined. It wasn't their refusal to surrender, though that defied all military logic. It wasn't even their ability to turn their entire civilization into a weapon, though that still gives me nightmares. The academy fell completely silent as Dexmore delivered his final revelation. The most terrifying thing about humans is their capacity for mercy when they hold absolute power. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy precisely because they choose not to be. He stood straighter, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through bitter experience. In the 50 cycles since the war ended, human coalition trade has increased by 3,000%. Joint research projects have produced medical breakthroughs that have saved millions of lives across dozens of species. Human military advisors have helped us develop defense strategies against threats we never even knew existed. The humans kept every promise they made in that treaty, Exmoor continued, his voice filled with genuine admiration. When the void plague struck the outer colonies, human medical ships arrived within days with treatments they had developed specifically for coalition physiology. When raiders attacked our shipping lanes, human patrol fleets responded faster than our own forces. A young Valthari officer raised her claw nervously. Commander, are you suggesting that humans are somehow naturally benevolent? That they lack the aggressive instincts that drive other species to expand and conquer? Exmoor's laughter held no humor. Cadet, humans are the most aggressively expansionist species in the galaxy, but they expand through cooperation rather than conquest. They turn former enemies into willing partners, and those partners help them reach even further into the unknown. Remember this lesson, younglings, he said, his voice growing solemn. If you ever encounter humans in conflict, show them the same respect they showed us. Not because they demand it, but because they've earned it through their actions, because they have proven that kindness is not weakness. It is the ultimate expression of strength. The ancient warrior moved closer to his audience, his forearms spread wide in a gesture that encompassed the entire assembly. Today, human colonies exist in every sector of the galaxy. But they're not conquest settlements. They're research stations, trading posts, and diplomatic embassies. Humans didn't conquer the galaxy by force. They inherited it through friendship. His final words echoed through the academy with the weight of absolute truth. Humans don't just win wars. They win the peace that follows. We'll inherit the galaxy not as conquerors, but as the species that everyone else wants to follow. The holographic display faded to show a single image, human and coalition children playing together on a playground built on the former site of Luna Station, now a memorial to both human courage and the possibility of peace between former enemies. War taught us that some victories are too costly to achieve, Exmoor concluded. But the peace that followed taught us that some partnerships are too valuable to lose. The end.